Marshall Vlasic, agent extraordinaire. Kate Hyman, A&R executive at BMG. Deborah Rathwell, senior VP of AEG. Well, welcome to Super Tuesday.
Yes.
Hope those of you who can will vote when the time comes in the state of New Jersey. We're continuing our series of seminars tonight with this special guest who traveled far and away to come here tonight, and I want to thank her for coming all the way up the Garden State, as opposed to the Turnpike. Although it's both his. Anyway, what can I say? Her name is Jorelle. Jorelle is the boss lady in charge of. Well, how many of you have been to the PNC Bank Arts Center? Okay, good. So you're all kind of familiar with it. It used to be the Garden State Arts Center.
Before they were born.
Yeah, I guess before you guys were born, but they got the PNC Bank to have some naming rights and help offset some of the costs of running the facility, I suppose. The facility is actually owned kind of by you guys. The Turnpike Authority is the owner of the building, and they've assigned or licensed or granted the or negotiated with Live Nation, and Live Nation books the venue. Now, Jorelle is not the person who books, although, as you see her career, she's done that before, but she's in charge. So everything from traffic, parking, facilities, the concessions, security, making sure everybody backstage has the right food access, keeping the state troopers happy. Got to keep them happy. And they have a nice variety and range of events and talent coming through there, starting usually in May and going through, September?
Yes.
So it's a pretty cool place. And if you're a poor college student and can't afford to buy a ticket, we were just discussing this, there's a oldie show going to be there open to the public. Total discretion here. I'm plugging something that's a SiriusXM event, but on the 26th of June. And if you're a New Jersey resident, you're entitled to come and watch. So anyway, I always like to start asking people, aside from getting in their car and getting here, how did you get started? Because you grew up in Canada?
I grew up in Canada, and I moved to New York in high school. My family moved to New York in high school. And I came from the theater world. So I studied theater in college, in graduate school, and wound up working. I worked off-Broadway. I worked as an actor for a long time, which means that I waited tables in a lot of restaurants. And I made a lot of money waiting tables, actually. And then I wound up producing theater. So I was a director and a producer, and I worked off-Broadway in New York, lived in New York. And I sort of stumbled into a Broadway job. I was the assistant general manager at what, at the time, it was called the Ford Center for the Performing Arts. And and that building changed names several times, the Hilton Theater. It's now the, I can't even remember what it is right now. But
Times Square, right?
It's in Times Square. It's on 42nd Street and 7th. And it had the shows. It had Chitty Chitty Bang Bang and 42nd Street and Young Frankenstein and Spider-Man. Does anybody remember when Spider-Man was on Broadway and he fell and broke all the bones in his body? I was the executive director there at the time. Yeah. So the Spider-Man stunt double fell. He was looking down the bridge at Mary Jane, and he was not tied in properly. It was human error. He was not, a stagehand didn't tie him in properly at the back, and he looked over the bridge, and he fell 3 stories down to the orchestra pit and broke almost every bone in his body. Julie Taymor's big disgrace. So I was at that theater at that time, and right at the same time is when I started at PNC Bank Arts Center. So that theater at the time was owned by Live Nation. And so I worked there as the assistant general manager, and they said, "We think you'd be great in music." And I said, "No, I'm good. I'm kind of just a theater girl." And they moved me over to Irving Plaza. So I ran Irving Plaza.
Was that when or before, after it was the Fillmore?
That was before it was the Fillmore. Unfortunately, it was during it was the Fillmore, and then after we were able to restore its proper name. So I was there when it converted, which it was an unfortunate thing. Unfortunately,
how many of you have been to the Irving Plaza? Okay, so you're familiar with the.
Also ran the Gramercy Theater on 23rd and Lexington. That opened. That was also Live Nation. That opened in 2007. Just a little bit of a smaller club, kind of the size of Bowery, about 650 people. And I worked with your brother there quite a bit, as a matter of fact, at the Gramercy Theater. So I was at Irving Plaza for about 5 years, and then they said, "Do you want to go to the big leagues?" Which at Live Nation is the amphitheaters. And I said, "New Jersey, no, thank you."
You were still living in the city.
I was living in the city. I was running 2 rock clubs. I was the queen of clubs, and I said the things I would never do would be move to New Jersey, get married, or have a kid. I live in Belmar with my husband and my 5-year-old, so that worked out really well for me. So I said I would never go through a bridge, go over a bridge or through a tunnel, and they convinced me to take the job at the Art Center. I said, "I don't know anything about grass. We don't have any grass in Manhattan. I don't like the music, right? I'm an indie rock girl. There's nothing about an amphitheater that interests me whatsoever." But I said yes, because that's what you do. You say yes to an opportunity, and it's the best thing I ever did. So I've been there for 10 years. Wow. I'm going into my 11th season this summer, and it's an unbelievable place.
What were some of the challenges you faced? Obviously, it's been around more than 11 years. Your predecessor?
Well, there's never been a woman to run it before. Surprise, New Jersey. So the state troopers were really receptive to dealing with me as the boss. That worked out really well in the beginning. And the local politicians were really receptive to dealing with a woman. And the local security company, I could go on and on. So the biggest challenge I had at first was coming in and establishing myself and saying, "Hey, I'm now the voice of, I'm now the adult in the room," and being a woman, because they hadn't experienced that before, at least not in my capacity.
And what about, I would say, the politics? Because I think Governor Murphy lives in close proximity.
He does. He does. Apparently, he used to be a box holder, as a matter of fact, a season seat holder. Excuse me. Governor Christie came often. It's a big political venue, so they're there all the time, right? I mean, everybody wants to see whoever it is: Rod Stewart, James Taylor, Dave Matthews. So the governor, whoever he or she is always there.
Wow. I read somewhere that one of the talents that's always an annual event there is James Taylor. I was just, why is that?
He sells so well. It's really all about what you can sell. So James Taylor, we have James Taylor this summer, July 7th, and it's going to be close to a sellout, if not a complete sellout. And he doesn't play every year, so that helps as well. There's some artists, very few artists, that can play every single year and actually sell out. But James Taylor hasn't played there in about 6 years, so this will be a big show for us, a really big show.
Well, he's also, I think, with Jackson Browne. So.
He is with Jackson Browne. That helps a lot.
So I notice at times that Live Nation sort of seems to clone what goes on with you with Jones Beach. So is that something that is just hapstance, or is that, you think, something that is predetermined and booked?
It's a combination, but really, so Jones Beach is part of Live Nation, and it's our sister venue, right. As is BB&T Pavilion in Camden. So, I mean, along with most amphitheaters in the country, quite frankly.
Right.
But Jones Beach in particular has a lot of the same routing as us because we don't draw from the same audience. So when I have a show at the Arts Center, I can pull a zip report, which is a zip code report, and I can see where the people that purchase tickets are from, where they live. Now, maybe they're buying tickets for somebody else, right? But I can see a report from to see where everybody came from or purchased from, and we're not pulling from Long Island, and Long Island is rarely pulling from us. So I'll tend to have a little bit of a different season from Camden versus Jones Beach. I'll have a little bit of the similar season because we don't cannibalize each other's audiences.
So you actually can see where the audience is purchasing tickets from?
Absolutely. So, I mean, I have like their median household income. We have all sorts of data.
So where would be most of the audience normally come from?
It depends on the show.
It does, okay.
It does. So country music is from the South. South Jersey, that is. They come from Parkway South, and that's where our traffic backs up, is from Parkway South, is heading northbound. And all the zip codes are from the South and slightly west of New Jersey. As opposed to rock and pop tends to be slightly from the north, or the area, the sort of the Holmdel shore area, but it tends to be from the north. So it really depends on genre.
So jumping around a little bit, as you said that when you came in, people weren't used to having a female figure running the place. So in your career, and sorry for being a cliche in the Me Too world we're in, but how has it been being a woman in a fairly male-dominated industry?
In some ways it's challenging, and in some ways it's really, really exciting. So in the industry, there are certain departments that tend to have more women in them than in operations. So I'm the general manager, right? So I'm basically operations. I'm running the building. So on any given day, I might be having a discussion with Dave Matthew or his agent, and I might be carrying a piece of bike rack to set up gates, right? Anything that happens in the building falls under my purview and the people that work for me. But being a woman, being one of the only women that does that at our amphitheaters, right? We only have a handful of women, Live Nation across the country, that does that. There's a lot of physical challenges with it, which is possibly why women were not in the past drawn to that kind of work. However, on the accounting side, on the marketing side, there's a tremendous number of women in the music industry. So there are pockets where there's a tremendous number of women. Booking doesn't tend to be one of them, and operations doesn't tend to be one of them. And operations I can only speak about only because it's a rough business. It's rough physically. I'm walking around carrying bike rack out in the hot, sweaty, disgusting summer sun. It's not pretty.
But there's no prejudices or challenges?
Oh, there are. So there are. So I have, on a given show, we are required to use the state police. And the state police, we'll start with them, right? And they have their barracks on our property. So the state police barracks is just right across the Parkway and the same property as me. They are also owned by or run by the New Jersey Turnpike Authority. Right, exactly. So they sort of answer to them, but because they're my landlord, the Turnpike Authority, I'm required to use state police. So I have to deal with them on a daily basis. And that's a challenge because they don't want to
talk to the boss lady? They
don't want to always talk to the boss lady. Or they often come, and I'll have a state inspector, not police, that'll come by to look at, something that we're doing from a plumbing perspective. And sometimes I've had experience where no matter what I say, they want to talk to the person in charge. Right. No, but where's the guy in charge? Where's the man in charge? And no matter what I say, they don't believe that I'm in charge. So I do experience that quite a bit.
And how has that impacted you? Because when you started as an actor-actress along the way,
That's a good question. What it makes me do is it makes me hire a lot of women in my power positions. And it makes me go out of my way to mentor women because I know that there's no reason that I can't do this. I'm not doing the job any worse than any of my male counterparts. I'm not necessarily doing it better than them, but I'm not doing it any worse than them. There's no reason it shouldn't be a woman. So I do go out of my way to make sure that there are women who can learn from me, can learn from my mistakes, can learn from the job, can do on-site training, can jump in and get dirty with me. But I also have to use I have to use the fact that I'm a woman sometimes in a situation, right, to appeal to somebody's sense of what's right, or to have them listen to me, or to have it. I can't walk out there and boss the state troopers around. They just don't listen.
Are there any female state troopers?
Very few. There are some, very few. But I have a similar situation, sometimes with my landlord, because it tends to be it's a roadway authority, right? So it tends to be the people I interact with are a lot of engineers and maintenance people, which tend to be male for whatever reason, and they are sometimes hesitant to deal with a woman. I will say that I've been there for 10 years. I've made my mark. Everybody knows that I'm the boss lady by this point.
Right.
So I don't have to yell and scream to be heard anymore. But it took me a long time to get there.
And what was the difference in when you were worked? Okay, so let's say, what was it like at Irving Plaza? How different was that?
So I was the first general manager who was a female at Irving Plaza, Irving Plaza, iconic New York City venue.
Breaking the glass ceiling everywhere.
Yeah, right. But I will tell you that I don't think I faced nearly as much discrimination for being a woman in New York City as I did in New Jersey. The cops didn't have a problem. The local politicians, the local landlords around me, the local businesses, no problem whatsoever, even though I had not been preceded by another woman. But in New Jersey, it was different. And I do love New Jersey now that I've been here for a while. It took me a while. I said I wouldn't come here, but I love it. But I have to tell you that I faced a lot more discrimination at the Arts Center than I did in Manhattan.
And I would imagine less so when you were doing the theatrical side of things?
Certainly less so. So Broadway has many, many more women, even on the operations side.
So none of those issues there. What about, so you're dealing on a daily basis with the talent pools, agents and managers. So again, that's got to be, can you put the boss on the phone, please?
Well, sometimes it's a schmooze fest, right? Sometimes the agents and the managers, they often think that they're very much more important than perhaps I think they are. So sometimes there's a lot of schmoozing. Sometimes it's we have so-and-so coming, let's make sure we have the right vodka for that person. We'll have a drink with him or her, and we'll make sure that we have her specific Pinot Grigio or whatever it is. So there's some people that we cater to because they're industry icons, some I'm sure that you know well. And then there's some people that are a little bit more real people and want to talk to you about the day and the crowd and what's going to be good for the show, et cetera. So it sort of depends, but we go out of our way to make sure it's a good, or we try to go out of our way to make sure it's a good experience for them because we want them to bring their artists back. The most important thing about a night of James Taylor is that James Taylor wants to play there again, right? I want the audience to want to come back. I want the audience to spend money. I want James Taylor to come back, and I want his people, most importantly, to want to come back.
Now, my recollection, walking around there's concessions. So you can get food,
yes,
beverages. So how does that work? I mean, is that you're the landlord and...
So it works. We have an outside company that does our concessions, Legends. They also do Yankee Stadium and Dallas Cowboy Stadium. And the reason we have an outside company, number one, that's their specialty, right? We're in the music business. They're a concessions company. But it's also for the liquor license. They hold the liquor license. We're then able to get different sponsorships. PNC Bank Arts Center, right? PNC Bank spent money to name the building. We have the Cadillac VIP Club, et cetera, et cetera. On any given year, we'll have a sponsorship, and sometimes they involve alcohol. And you can't have a sponsorship. You can't have somebody pay to have their name on a building or to name an area if you have a liquor license, because then it's like pay to play. And the New Jersey Liquor Authority, most liquor authorities in most states are very, very careful about liquor companies paying to play. So we have an outside company that does our concessions. We have as many points of sale as absolute possible. And the reason for that is that I meaning Live Nation, PNC Bank Arts Center, make almost all my profit from concessions, from ancillary revenue.
So let's get that straight. So when I buy a ticket, that's covering the talent fees and the admin work that goes involved in the parking and all that stuff.
It's often not even covering the admin fees. It may just be going to talent. And then if it more than covers talent, the overage of the ticket fees, the overage of the ticket sales go to the artist as well. So rarely do I make anything on ticket sales. Maybe on a really, really great show, if the deal is cut really well, I might make $10,000 or $15,000 off of a $500,000 gross ticket sales.
Hope you all hear that and understand that.
So that means that all of that money is going towards the artist or the artist crew and the stagehands, right? Some form of expenses. And then everything else is whether you buy a hot dog or a beer, whether you upgrade into the VIP club, or there's some ticketing fees and whatnot, and that is how the venue makes money.
So the ticket fee, or the, again, whatever they call it, the service fee, that is another possible revenue stream.
It is. So Ticketmaster charges service fees, right? We ate Ticketmaster. Live Nation merged with Ticketmaster several years ago, but they're a completely different division. So when they claim money off of a show, it doesn't hit my bottom line. But Ticketmaster, with all their venues, not just Live Nation venues, but whether they work with whoever else they work with, they do a sort of a revenue share on the ticketing fee. So I get a percentage, a smaller than half percentage of whatever ticketing fees that Ticketmaster charges. So there's some revenue that hits my bottom line as the venue as well from ticketing fees. Yes.
So if the bulk of the income goes towards the artist and their needs, you have custodial crew, you have stage crew. Is that from that menial profit?
It is. So on any given day, there's 700 to 1,000 people that work at the Arts Center for me, not including the 100 people or so that have come on buses and trucks for the actual show. And that all comes from the concession sales and the parking upgrade sales and the ticketing fees and the, if you upgrade into, like I said, into the VIP club or you buy a lawn chair or whatever it is, that all of that is covered by those fees.
Because somebody explained to me the movie theaters don't make money on showing a film, they make money on popcorn and soda.
It's the exact same thing.
It's the exact same thing.
Yep.
So I guess the analogy here is that the talent is making the bulk of the money. So when somebody starts screaming, Celine Dion is $260 a ticket and saying that's a ripoff, well, go complain to Celine Dion.
It would be the number one thing that I wish people knew, just sort of general people, not you folks in the room who are actually studying this and actually interested in this, but I wish everybody knew that we don't set the ticket prices. Now, the booking staff at Live Nation, the touring staff, they might have a part in it. They might have a hand in it. They might say, yes, we think you can get this much money, but we're not actually seeing the revenue from those tickets, from those dollars. There are artists that want to keep their prices low, right?
Green Day was touring for like $30 a couple of years.
Right, exactly. Dave Matthews keeps his tickets low, right? Lawn across the board is $45 and everything in the house is $85 or how much ever it is. But it's, Luke Bryan, I think, does the same thing. There's some artists that are sort of very, they just want like 2 or 3 price points, and they don't allow you to dynamically price, which means like, the airlines raise the price of a ticket as you get closer to the date. We do that as well now, right? So there's certain shows and certain artists that allow us to raise the price of a ticket as we get closer, or as the certain section of the theater starts to sell out. We can then say, you know what, this ticket was selling and went like that for $120. Let's try $140 for the remaining 300 tickets and see if it goes. That money is still going toward the artist, but we do it because we want them to want to play our venue, right? So we dynamically price up sometimes, but that's with their permission. And then there are some artists who don't want to do that at all because they want to keep their costs completely affordable for their fans.
And what about some of the artists the big revenue stream is the VIP meet and greets?
And my biggest headache.
Because?
It is so challenging. I will say that 10 years ago, 9 years ago, 8 years ago, when I was first at the amphitheater, there was like, a couple of meet and greets backstage, and that was it. There was never like an additional party.
And there was no fee back then.
And there was no fees. Now they all charge $200, $300, $400, right? Luke Bryan comes in. I have to rent a tent and get a stage and have my stagehands put up a whole scenario, and they have
Who pays for that?
Food. Now the company that does it, so there are party companies. There's CID and VIP Nation and 23/7 Global, and I'm sure a number of other ones that work with the tour, and those folks tour around the country with the artists, and they put them on. But the amount of work from my staff and for me with those parties is astronomical, and we don't make anything on that because they've paid $300, let's say, to CID to have a meet and greet and a one song concert with Luke Bryan. They're just renting a tent from me. So that unfortunately is a big part of their income stream and just a big headache on our end, on the operations end.
You see nothing of that.
No, unfortunately not. I haven't figured out a way to monetize that, is what I should say.
I noticed a couple of years ago, started doing these, I don't know what you call it, genre tickets, so you could go to a bunch of country concerts.
Yep.
So how does that work?
So we do 2 of them. One is called the Mega Ticket, and that's country. So we have, country is, it's not my music, I don't get it. But country is like pop music, right? Right now, it's like, that's what's popular. So we have, this summer we have 9 country shows, and 7 of them are on the country Mega Ticket. And that's predetermined. That's not determined by us. That's determined by the Live Nation Country Touring Division. And they're all in the country. So you can buy one ticket to have the same seat for all 7 of those mega ticket shows. So you can buy a lawn ticket, you can buy a loge sort of mid-level ticket, or you can buy what we call a P1, which is price level 1, expensive front section ticket. And you'd have the same ticket for the same seat for all 7 of those country shows. We also do something called Ticket to Rock, and that is something that we created based on the mega ticket, and that's more like hard rock. So this year, I think it includes Alice Cooper and Disturbed and Breaking Benjamin and Megadeth, right? Some completely different genre than the country mega ticket.
So your season for concerts is from May till sometime in the fall, say September. What the heck do you do the rest of the year?
I just play golf.
I don't think so.
No. I've never played golf before. It takes me from, let's start with this season. So the season starts in May. I like to say that the only thing worse than March is April, and the only thing worse than April is May. April and May are harder than July and August. Getting ready for a season is unbelievably difficult. Hiring, right? We hire 1,000, 1,500 people, so we have job fairs.
Oh, so it's not the same people every year?
Not necessarily. And even if it is, we still need to sort of re-engage them and orient them a lot of times.
They're not salaried year-round?
No, they're not salaried year-round. There's very few of us who are salaried year-round, as a matter of fact. Almost everybody who works at the amphitheater is seasonal.
Wow.
Right, so there's like a couple of salespeople and maybe 2 or 3 of us that are salaried. Everybody else is not there. So right now there's very few people in my office that work there. But we are getting ready for the season because it's March. The minute that March happens, it's on, is what I like to say. So we are what we say we're de-winterizing, right? So there's everything from the physical parts of the building that we have to get ready, turning the water on, figuring out what's still broken, all of that kind of stuff, whatever broke over the winter. And then there's hiring. We've got to hire 1,500 people. We're getting ready for the season, so I spend a lot of my time forecasting. I think I'm going to sell this much in beer sales, and I think I'm going to sell this many VIP club entries, and I think we're going to sell this many tickets to this. So there's a lot of crystal ball forecasting. So that really is, the planning of that is February. The execution of it is from March till May. The last few weeks before a show, we're like chickens with our heads cut off, right? It's every single day. And then the first show happens. It's usually like the mid-May. This year it's a little bit later. We're doing some renovations. It's usually mid-May. And then you have shows. So a show for me is a 16-hour day. For my production team, it's more like 18 to 20 hours, right? But I'm a slacker. So for me, it's a 16-hour day. And all the prep work has gone into the show. You have the show day, and then it takes 2 or 3 days to close out that show. But you could have back-to-back shows, right? So then you sort of run like it. I mean, at some point in the middle of July, it's Groundhog Day, and you don't know what show it is anymore, right? And the tours, interestingly, say the same thing. They're riding on a bus, and they don't know what venue they're at anymore. They're like, where are we again? Every once in a while, an artist says the wrong town. Like, they get up there, and they're like, we love you, New Jersey. But every once in a while, they say something, and you're like, you messed that one up, because it's Groundhog Day for them, too. And then so we just plow through. It's just nonstop. I don't take a single day off in the summer. I live at the beach. I live in Belmar. Complete waste. I don't take any days off in the summer. There's just no possible way. Every day is either a show day or you're recovering from a show, meaning doing all the financials, or prepping for a show. And you need to be, because if I take a day off, I try to take one day off where I turn my phone off. I don't even bring it with me. I go to the beach. It's a nightmare, right? I mean, if you take like any time of year, if you take a Monday off, your emails, you're screwed. You can take a Saturday off, but I don't have any Saturdays off because it's mostly shows, right? So the summer is nonstop. We go till, let's say, the end of September, middle of September, depending, which then in theory, it would take me about a month and a half to close up the venue. So by Thanksgiving, I'm good. So in theory, I should have half of November, December, January, travel, put my feet up. But I'm an idiot. And I brought holiday lights back to the Arts Center.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah. So now it's a great show, but not so much time off for me and my staff. So now instead of having our feet up on our desk, we're doing the Christmas show.
Yeah, can you explain what the holiday?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you haven't seen it before, it's actually very cool. It's a drive-through event. It's $25 or $30. It's for 40 days from mid-November till right after New Year's, and it's a drive-through light show. So it's 2.5 miles, and it takes anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes to drive through. And there's a holiday village. It's really a family event. There's a holiday village in the middle of it where you can go ice skating, or you can see Santa, get your photo taken with Santa, get some hot chocolate and some s'mores.
So this is hiring another staff to just do that.
So this is right. So the good thing about the event, I say I'm an idiot because now I have no time off at all, except that the great thing about the event is that I have all these people that work for me in the summer. And then we don't get to see them for 7 months, right? So now all of a sudden, it's kind of more of a year-round job for them. Now all of a sudden, they get a pocket of money. They get 40 days that they can potentially work, which is really nice for them. It's a great event for the community. It's a good event for the venue because everybody gets to work. It's only not a good event for this guy because I don't get to rest very much. But really, it's a good event. I mean, it's really and it's completely different than what we do.
Isn't there some sort of museum or veterans?
There is, but we don't actually have anything to do with it. So the New Jersey Vietnam War Memorial is on our property, but only because they happen to be on our property.
So what is it?
It is literally a war memorial. It's from Vietnam, and they do events there, and they have galas, and they do bike ride, motorcycle rides and stuff like that. But it's all about Vietnam. It's very cool, actually. A lot of times there's school buses that are going to learn about the Vietnam War.
And then I drove through there once, and I saw. I guess they don't use it, but there was some sort of banquet hall?
So there was the Robert B. Minor Reception Center, and it was like a wedding hall or a banquet hall. But it's defunct. The catering company that was using it went out of business or left it about 5 or 6 years ago. But they would have weddings there. And you book your wedding 1.5 years in advance. I don't know what my season is until January or February. So you've got a wedding booked, and I've got Motley Crue playing that day. Ooh. And so you're saying your vows, and the operations manager from there would call me. Wasn't a nice guy. He would call me and he'd say, "Could you tell Motley Crue to change their sound check because we're going to do our vows at that time?" No. I cannot go to Motley Crue and ask them to change their sound check. So it was a challenging venue for him in that regard. But it closed down about 5 years ago.
Got it. Just looking at the history, and probably most of it predates you, I would think. There was the Sinead O'Connor, who always is a fun guest. I think she's coming to New York in a couple of weeks. Yeah. So I guess she wasn't aware that we in New Jersey actually have some respect for the flag.
I guess not. It does predate me, though.
So she had an issue with that, and then
yes.
And then there's the I think Fish had some people were arrested. I guess
2002, something like that.
Yeah, they were. Yeah,
and then didn't play the venue again until 2011.
And then then the underage drinking
in 2008 with Gwen Stefani.
Well, there was also one with Ozzy.
Yeah. Oh, yes. So those predated me as well. But what I walked into...
So there's been no controversy since you've been there.
Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you very much.
Mama takes care.
I have to say that it's much more challenging now, too, with social media, right? So 10 years ago, 15 years ago, people weren't tweeting. People weren't taking a picture and posting it somewhere that every single person can see, right? It's much more challenging now than it was before. So I'm pretty proud of the fact that we're not in the news too often. But I will say that when I started at the venue, it was 2010, and they brought me in as, the face of safety because we had banned tailgating the year before. I wasn't at the venue, but in 2009, tailgating is like a right in New Jersey. That's what I've learned. It's a right, right? You're born, and then you get to tailgate, and it doesn't really matter how old you are. So in 2009 they banned it because in 2008 there was and I think 2007 was the Aussie thing. There was a lot of drama and a lot of political outcry from the Arts Center and underage drinking and whatnot. And so in 2009 they banned it. I don't know if it was I think it was the landlord mostly, the local police, et cetera, the state police. So in 2010, Live Nation wants to bring tailgating back because I don't make any money off of tailgating, right? You bring your own beer and you sit in my parking lot. and then you probably don't buy a beer from me later. So it's not really good for me, except that in 2009, we had 24 shows, and every year before and after that, we had about 34 shows. So it wasn't a fun venue. Nobody wanted to play it. There were Dave Matthews, there were artists that wouldn't come play our venue because we were known as not fun. And then people didn't want to come to the venue because we weren't allowing you to do your God-given right to tailgate. So they brought me in 2010 and they said, she's the face of safety. And they said, we're going to bring tailgating back. And, she's, I don't know, they said a lot of malarkey about my safety record of people drinking, which I was running clubs in New York City where nobody drives. So that was a bunch of BS. But anyway, we brought back tailgating. In 2010, we did have 34 shows. We allowed it to be banned still at 3 shows, the 3 rowdiest shows. We said, okay, we still won't allow it at the time OAR was still rowdy, 311 and Beatstock, if anybody has ever heard of that show. It was pretty awful. And so we said, no, okay, fine, we'll follow your rules, and we still won't do tailgating at the most caustic shows. And then after that, it was fine, right? And we brought it back. So, yay, you can tailgate again.
We talked about concessions. What about merch?
So merch. Actually, I get less of merch than I do of the ticket sales. Merch is for the artist, and again, the way I look at a show day is I kind of work for the artist. I want them to come, have a great experience, sell a lot of merch, sell a lot of VIP packages that give me the biggest headache ever, enjoy their experience. Hopefully the showers all work backstage, et cetera, right? Hopefully they get their green M&Ms, and they leave and they go, that place was pretty cool. Or at least if they don't say that place was pretty cool, they don't say, wow, that place sucked, right? And then they're willing to come back, because the artist will say, can I swear?
Of course.
The artist will say, F that, I'm not going back to that place. That place sucks. They didn't have any hot water. They didn't have any, the place was a dump. There are artists who have made us rent buses, like tour buses, to have on standby for them, just in case our dressing rooms were crappy. Yeah. It's $5,000 out of my pocket. Not me personally, obviously, but the Arts Center. So there are needs, there are wants. They're on the road all the time. I imagine, like I said, it's Groundhog Day for them. The artists themselves, they have it pretty good, but their entire crew, if they walk in and it's a shitty venue and it's dirty and disgusting and there's no hot water, they've been on a bus with 8 people, they're waiting to shower at a venue, right, with real water pressure, and they get there and we have dirty, disgusting showers or water that doesn't work, et cetera, then the artist doesn't. So I work for the artist. So you asked me about merch and I went down the bathroom road. So they take 85% of a merch deal. So whatever you're selling, the artist is going to get usually 80 or 85%. Let's say 80. CDs, DVDs, not that anybody buys that anymore, but sometimes they're selling, digital. They're getting 90% of that. And then the company that sells the merch, which is an outside company for me, gets anywhere from 10 to 13% of that. So I'm only taking 3 to 7%, depending on the deal, of merch. So merch isn't that interesting to me. I run a business, and listen, I love live music and I love what I do, but really I run a business, and so I find myself not paying as much attention to merchandise because it doesn't bring in too much money for me. It's a couple grand a show.
I will say your hospitality is pretty amazing, what you do. There's a room backstage and they have a full course meal. It's like going to a wedding or a bar mitzvah or something. There's, chafing dishes, sterno, and salads, and any beverage you want. It's quite amazing. There's little tables, and you sit down, and they even have ice cream at the end if you want.
We do.
And I've seen cakes and cookies, and
oh, yeah.
You obviously have a chef on site who does.
We do.
It's pretty amazing, and that's for the posers and people who really don't necessarily have any real reason to be there other than I'm the agent of the band, I need to be there. Obviously it's for the crew and the artist, but it's if you get the right colored ticket, you can go back there and you can have a quite nice meal prior to the show. It's quite an amazing operation you run. So there was some renovation work done this year,
There
I kept
was.
hearing, we don't know when the season's going to start. Because
Yeah.
what are they renovating?
So we're, if you've been to the Arts Center, you probably have been frustrated at how crowded it is and that you couldn't go to the bathroom. Understatement. So the venue was built in 1965. It began, right? In 1968 it opened, and it was for the first, 20 years. It was, or more than that, it was 11,000 people. 10,500 and something. And then what they did before I was there in 1996, they expanded the lawn. So where the 400 level, the back level of seats were, used to be part lawn, and it only went up a little bit into what's the lawn now. What they did is they expanded the lawn, and my capacity now is 17,000 people. But what they didn't do is add an additional beer stand or an additional place to pee, to get rid of that beer. Right? So you've come there and you've come to whatever show you like, and if it's crowded, you realize that you can't go to the bathroom, right? Frustrating experience. So what we are doing is everything you do in the venue is a big circle. You walk up, we talk about everything being north and south because we are the Parkway, right? We're our own exit on the Parkway.
Yep.
So you walk up to the North Plaza or you walk up to the South Plaza, right? And then you go into the theater. We have torn down those plazas. We had underground bathrooms that people probably live in. I mean, it was bad up there. I had, for 17,000 people, not including porta potties, a permanent 99 stalls per gender. And I have 20-minute intermission for 17,000 people to go to the bathroom that have hopefully had a lot of water, soda, beer, etc. And I have a 20-minute window for them to use 99 stalls, plus a bunch of disgusting porta potties. So that's why we're doing massive renovations. So we completely tore down those plazas, and we're starting from scratch, new concession buildings, new bathrooms. I'm happy to report that the bathrooms are increasing by 60%. And we will be ready for our first show. Tell me when to stop.
When you feel you got enough.
Yeah.
Wow. The other cool thing about the venue, and again, it probably predates you, is there's been lots of live albums.
Basically, he keeps saying everything that's cool predates me. You notice that, right? Yeah, that does predate me. But there was a lot of cool stuff there.
The Allman Brothers did something.
Pearl Jam did something.
Glenn Campbell. Yeah. It's a cool venue.
Yeah.
And you've got a good sound system.
We do have a good sound system. The thing that is the coolest thing is just that it's a piece of like New Jersey history, right? One of the first acts was Judy Garland.
Wow.
Right? I mean, how cool is that in 1968? The biggest acts in the world have come through there, and there's nothing else like it in New Jersey. I mean, we're our own stop on the Parkway. Yeah. Right? So that's just what's really cool.
You got those great electronic billboards.
And we have that billboard. We're the only people that are allowed to advertise on the Garden State Parkway. Right. So you're not allowed to advertise. If you drive the Garden State Parkway, there's no ads. Now maybe, especially if you're near the outer bridge or whatever, maybe you can see a couple of signs that are actually for other roadways, right? There's a couple areas where there's the Department of Transportation, allowed some signs but really were for other roadways. But if you drive up and down the entire Garden State Parkway, there is no, there's billboards all over the turnpike, right? There's nothing on the Garden State Parkway, but we have our own because our landlord is the Garden State Parkway
Except at the toll booths.
Authority.
There's always a little poster that tells you who's coming.
Right, yeah. Those are called nosings, bull nosings.
Nosings.
Yeah.
Live and learn.
Yeah.
Wow.
Information you never needed.
You never know.
Yeah, you never know.
Oh, so a couple of questions from the peanut gallery here.
Good.
So Paul said, show day, you're going to be really busy. So what do you find the most effective use of your time? And do you have a checklist day of show that you have to go through before the doors are open?
That's a great question. I have a couple of checklists. So I have an actual operations checklist of things that I need to make sure are ready to open the doors. So let's just say the doors are at 5 o'clock. We open gates at 5 o'clock. Probably means I open my parking lots at 3 o'clock, right?
What time's show?
What time is show? If it's 5 o'clock, probably 6:30, the first act. We try to do about an hour and a half to get everybody in and buy a beer, right? So they're not all coming because they're tailgating. They're doing their, whatever. So it's not that they're all coming in right at 5 o'clock, but we want to give them enough time if they want to come in. Dave Matthews Crowd, if Dave is going on at 8, they will show up at the gates at 7:47. And they will give me 13 minutes to get 17,000 people in. And then be annoyed that they're not in for his first song. That's just that crowd, right? The James Taylor crowd, they're probably walking a little slower. They're going to come in a little bit earlier. So it just depends on the crowd. Country folks, they're tailgating. They're kind of all over the place, you know, depending on when they're coming in the venue. So to answer the question, I have a couple of checklists. I have a checklist that's the actual facility. Are the bathrooms ready? Is there toilet paper? Is there soap? Is there, you know, are the concession stands ready? All of that physical stuff. Is my staff in place? Do they have, you know, a bank so that they can upsell the parking? All of that stuff. Are our digital signs ready? Are we ready? Right? But my day of show checklist is also in my head because I have to look at it as the Prime Minister. I have to have PNC Bank Arts Center. I have to look at it from, I'm Canadian, right? So I went Prime Minister. I have to look at it from a macro perspective. So I have to say, when I get there in the morning, the first thing I do is head backstage and make sure that, you know, load-in starts. I get there shortly after load-in, right? I have a production manager that opens up the building and does that. I get back there, I talk to the tour, and I make sure, first thing, production manager, how's it going? What's going on here, right? Then I've got to talk to my crew, I call them the utility crew, the U crew, right? And they're the ones that are like, you know, fixing the toilets, and they're there at 8 in the morning making sure everything front of house is good. And so I'm talking to them saying, you know, what problems do we have here? And then there's the VIP parties, and they want to come in at 9 o'clock and set up their meet and greet spaces and all of that kind of stuff. So it's kind of like it's a complete onslaught from 8 or 9 in the morning. And then, but I have departments that deal with each thing, right? I have a merch manager.
When do you have to get there in the morning?
I don't have to get, I get there between 8 and 9 usually.
Show day?
On show days, yeah.
And non-show days?
Non-show days, it varies, but non-show days, you know, usually by 10 o'clock, only because there's only so many hours in the day.
So, no one's asked this yet, I'm sure they will, but how do you juggle a personal life with this kind of life, with this job? I mean, it's a heck of a lifestyle.
So it's a challenge.
You have kids.
I do. I have a kid. I have a 5-year-old daughter. I will say, so I've been at the Art Center for 10 years. I have a 5-year-old daughter, right? I will say that I became more efficient when I had a kid because all of a sudden I had to get home. I worked, when I first took this gig, I just worked until I needed to work. If I stayed there until 10 o'clock at night, or 9 o'clock at night, whatever it was, I drove home, I listened to the Yankee game on the way home, and it wasn't a big deal. I worked as late as I had to. I got there whenever I could in the morning. Now I have a more sort of rigorous schedule because I have a family. And so I have to leave at 4:30 to pick up my daughter from, she's still in daycare for another few months. So I have to leave at 4:30 to get her. So I have to be done anything I'm going to do until I can open up my laptop, once she's fallen asleep at 8:30 or 9 o'clock at night. So I find myself more efficient with family, but it's a challenge, I'll tell you that. It's a challenge.
Also, I assume you're taking the Garden State down to Belmar, and you don't know what the traffic's like.
On Fridays?
And on the weekends,
Yeah.
Show day. Ooh.
Well, on show days, I'm actually working against traffic. So if I have a Friday show, I'm going up, right, away from the beach at 9 a.m., and I'm going home, I leave at 1 a.m., so it's clear at that time. Rarely do I have traffic at 1 a.m. When I lived in New York City, I did the reverse commute, which, by the way, there's no such thing as reverse commute. I did the reverse commute, and that was terrible, because Friday mornings, I'd be trying to get to my job at 8 or 9 in the morning, and I'd have short traffic. It was terrible. But now I'm kind of working against it.
Okay. Amanda wanted to know that we're asked the question, with Live Nation's connection to a vast array of venues, what advice would you give to startup artists, managers, promoters who want to create a successful relationship with the venues?
I say start small, play small, and don't think you're bigger than you are. So if you can sell out Gramercy or the Stone Pony or one of the small venues, and that's all you can do, and you can get 300 people there, and they let you keep playing. Don't assume that you can then go to whatever the next size is. Keep playing, keep building those relationships with Live Nation, AEG, Bowery Present, whoever it is, and let them grow you. But say yes. Say yes to playing small, because the more we meaning the industry, the more we can grow you as a band, the more we think that we're going to see potential for you. So start small and say yes. Play all the time, even if you make $4.
Okay, Samantha, have you heard of the Women National Fund?
I don't know.
Samantha? Is she here?
Oh, she's sick. That was
Oh, okay. She asked a question, but
Ooh, I got off the hook for that one. Okay. Yeah, sure, I've heard of it.
Let's see. Elizabeth, want to know what you thought about VR replacing live concerts someday.
Here's the thing. Assuming that the current corona hysteria is only that and dies down and we're all safe, there's no experience like going out and being at a live event with other people, right?
Yep.
So do you really want to watch it in your living room? I don't care how good your speakers are. And sometimes the artists are worse live. I acknowledge that. Sometimes they totally screw up their songs. I was mad at the Counting Crows for a really long time. But there's no experience like being there with a whole bunch of people, right? Whether it's 500 people, 5,000 people, 15,000 people, and actually hearing somebody live. So because I'm in the business of hospitality, right? I'm hosting an event. You're still going to come to it. It could be Whitney Houston, dead, performing, right? Didn't she just do that, or isn't she about to do that?
Yeah.
Right? You're still going to come. It still might be at the Arts Center. It's never going to be the same experience in your living room, right? It's screwed with movie theaters, but I don't think it's going to screw with live music.
But then the movie theaters are doing these one-night specials with.
And you can get food and wine and delivered to your table. And
Yep.
Now it's like a Barca lounger, and it's like I'm like Joey and Chandler when I go to the movies. It's amazing. And I'm still kind of paying the same price, right? It's only a couple bucks more. So they lure me in because they have fewer seats, and I can sit like that. So they kind of figured it out. And I'm still buying their overpriced popcorn.
But don't you also have VIP sections?
We sure do.
And those are, is that for the season or?
There's a combination. So we have a VIP club and a VIP section. We sell VIP seats. We sell, a box of 4 seats or 6 seats, right? And then they get to come into the club all season. They get to park really close. They get to think that they're really important because they spend the most money, right? So they're spending whatever they're spending, I don't know, 30 grand, let's say, for a box of 4 seats or 6 seats. And they get to come to every single show. And then we have smaller versions of that around, right? We have like a reserved lawn area. So if you're just buying a lawn ticket, but you just don't want to be packed into the lawn, and maybe you want a little bar area, or you want to be a little bit closer, you can pay to upgrade to go into the reserved lawn, right? So that's sort of a different kind of a VIP thing. So we have different little areas around for sort of different price levels, if you will. But the VIP club is that's the season seats.
Got it. You touched on this, but the coronavirus, what do you think that's going to do to the live music?
I think it's I think it's super challenging for us. Absolutely. People are already, they're not flying, right? Our flights have been canceled. Airports, TSA has already seen a 10% reduction, and the virus has only been in the States for a couple weeks. I think it's a huge, huge risk for live music and for live entertainment in general. I mean, it's the same thing for Broadway. It's the same thing for, for sports, absolutely. People are not going to want to go out. So it depends on, right, but the part of the problem is that there's, 100 cases, 120 cases in the US. There's been 9 deaths. Way more people have died of the regular flu. But we're not hearing about it. But we live in a 24-hour news world, so we're hearing about it on all fronts. Everything is hysteria because we have access to that much news, right? So how dangerous is it? How likely are we in this room to get it? Hopefully not at all. Hopefully it's not dangerous at all. But it gets in people's minds because of our 24-hour news world, right? Because of the interweb. So I think it is going to affect us. I think that if it grows at the pace that it's been growing, the hysteria, it's absolutely going to affect my business.
I talked to a manager of an artist who's on a big tour this summer, and he said that they're not going to do this summer. They're not going to do the meet and greets. It's too. It's a lot of money, but it's.
Oh, I hope you're right. Those things are awful. No, I'm kidding. Just for me.
But they said, I'm worried about the tour.
Yeah.
But if the tour goes on, I don't think we're going to do the meet and greets.
I'm hearing that there are artists that don't even want to tour. Now, I have my busiest season in 15 years this summer, so that's clearly not the case this summer, but they booked the summer before the coronavirus, right? They booked their tours. I've been forecasting these shows since the fall, but I have heard that. I've heard that there are some artists that are maybe choosing not to go out right now. especially if they've been overseas or touring overseas.
Well, there's a lot of overseas tours that were canceled.
Yeah,
So that.
absolutely.
Yes, sir.
Can you buy insurance for that as the promoter?
Well, she's not the promoter, but
I'm not the promoter, but yes. So yes, it's like a force majeure, right? If there is a reason for a cancellation that is not sort of directly Live Nation or directly the artist, then yes. We actually had to cancel a show last summer because of weather, which is the hardest part of my job, and corn. And we had to cancel it like as people were in the parking lots. We were about to open gates and we had to make the decision. Lightning was all over the place and we had to make the decision, right? Safety is more important than a concert, believe it or not. And we had to make the decision with Korn's management as to whether or not we were going to have the show. So we have insurance for that. I did not cause that weather, right? So Live Nation did not cause that. We're powerful. We're not that powerful. So we did have insurance for that. So we didn't have to pay them necessarily their whole guarantee. There is insurance for that, yes. So I assume that it would translate similarly, with an epidemic. Yeah.
But for the corn show specifically for that, calling it due to weather, is that your decision with management?
Yes.
Do you go above?
It is my decision with management. We monitor the weather with 2 or 3 national services, state police, the state, and it's literally the most stressful part of my job. Because you're talking about how many people get hit by lightning? Not many. So why wouldn't you just have a concert? It's a rain or shine venue. It's probably not going to happen. Do you really want to cancel a show, turn away 17,000 people, have to pay the artist, lose all that revenue, have to reschedule the show? The headaches are infinite. But God forbid one person, right? I don't even need to say it. And yes, there is insurance for stuff like that.
sir.
I have an off-topic question, but what was it like working with a large-scale tour like Van's Warped Tour?
Well, the first year, I thought I was going to go into cardiac arrest. But actually, Van's Warped Tour was awesome, and it wasn't the hardest day of the year. It was the earliest day of the year. But they were self-sufficient. The really cool thing about Van's Warped Tour, besides the swag you can buy, is that they come in, they're like gypsies, right? They come in, their trucks all show up, some of them show up the night before, it just depends. They show up, they're in an area, and then at 7 a.m. they get into place. There's one production manager, his name's Kerry. He tells every truck where it can go and where it can park, and he stands like this. And the trucks have to line themselves up with him. Those truck drivers are the best truck drivers in America. He stands like this and he won't move. Kerry won't move. And the trucks that then open up into stages, they have to pull in and be exactly where he is without killing him. But they all do it. And then all the vendors swoop in, right? And they all set up and everything happens almost on their own. Now, obviously, I have a million stagehands there and a million operations people, et cetera, et cetera. But actually, they function almost like, it's like carnies, right? It's like how I imagine a traveling carnival would be. It's cool as anything. I mean, really. And we've done lots of other festivals. We did the Mayhem Festival and Uproar and Lilith Fest back in the day.
Laid back.
Laid back festival, not so much. That's much more contained, unfortunately, much more contained. But the Warped Tour is, and you have never seen a messier venue than the next day, and it's the Warped Tour people. It's not the audience, right? My staff cleans up after the audience, and then the 900 people that are on Warped Tour usually have a party if they don't have a show the next day, if they're not running to their buses. Holy crap, are they messy. It's awesome. It's cool. Like I said, the first time I almost had a coronary because I was like, how am I going to do this? What the what? Are you kidding me? But year 2, it was good.
What about these Polish festival and Italian festival and?
They have unfortunately gone away. So those were hosted by my landlord. They were a function the landlord has, as of course Steve knows very well. They have a not-for-profit called the Garden State Arts Foundation, right? Because the Garden State Arts Center is the New Jersey Turnpike Authority. So they have the Garden State Arts Foundation, and they do these wonderful shows, and they did those festivals as well. So there was an Italian festival and an Irish festival and a Polish festival and African American festival. But they decided, I think for monetary reasons, to pull them, which was a shame. It's nice to have events that are not necessarily rock and roll or country, right? It's really nice to be a venue with so many events. So I was disappointed when those went away. And again, more work for my staff.
I just had a quick question because you talked about how there's very few people in your office who work year-round.
Yes.
I'm assuming you don't have many interns, if any, just because there's so few people working there? But
Now that's a good question. So the way it works, like the year-round people, I have I have two different sales departments, and me and an operations manager. That's it, right? And a box office manager. So my sales departments are the sponsorship team. They sell PNC. They sell the naming rights to PNC or a deck to Citibank, or they allow the New Jersey Lotto to come in and activate at a show. So there's the sponsorship department, and they're full time, and they have interns, but they're generally seasonal interns. So they'd start in April or May, and they're working directly for that department. And then there's a sales department that's actually selling the season seats, right? We call them the premium seat division, and there's two sellers and a coordinator with them, and they always, I don't know what their interns do. They always have interns. They've got interns in the winter when they're not even coming to work. So I don't know what those folks do, but yes, there are interns year round, and then in the summer there are more departments that tend to get interns. Yeah. How do you become an intern? Let's just say that we're going to ask that question. Honestly, the best way to do it is to come to our job fair or to know somebody. I don't mean me. Because we post on livenation.com, right, for interns, and then we will interview, but those are for those positions at the premium sales and the sponsorship departments. So livenation.com always lists when they need interns. And then you interview for the process, et cetera. And then we have a job fair every year for the season, at least one. This year it's on May 2nd, and it's at the venue, which we'll be advertising later this week, as a matter of fact. Because we're opening up a little bit later this summer because we have no buildings right now. So we're a little delayed.
Are interns paid?
Usually not. It depends. Some intern programs, sometimes there's a national program. We had an intern last summer who did social media for us, but really she just sort of monitored for us and then talked to our social media department. She took a lot of photographs. That was a paid position because it was a national program with Live Nation. So if you look up Live Nation, intern program, they have a national program through colleges, but you have to be getting, in order to not be paid, you have to be getting college credit. I can't just have you come and work in my office and file stuff for free. It's illegal. Or you're my 5-year-old. She knows the alphabet. It's all good.
You talked about how country and pop and rock. I wonder what about the other genres? Classical?
Is there anything besides country?
Well, and not that you're the booker by any stretch of the imagination, but would you be able to surmise or guess why there aren't more classical or jazz or the number one musical genre right now, at least from download and sales, is hip hop.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, forgive me, I don't recall seeing many hip hop shows being advertised.
Well, I'll tell you that this year I don't have any yet, but last year or the year before I had 4 or 5. Hip hop actually draws huge crowds. They almost always sell out. And there's, anywhere from most years. I mean, I've had very few years where Wiz Khalifa is not at my venue. And we love a Wiz Khalifa show. They're challenging in certain ways, right? People aren't buying beer, so in revenue way, they're a little bit challenged. They're challenged because a lot of those kids who are coming to the show have gotten beer before they show up, so that's the underage drinking problem, right? I'm not serving them. We're very strict with our liquor license, or as strict as we can be.
Well, you got the cops right on it.
Well, I got the cops right there, and they're going to take away my liquor. I don't want to sell beer to a 20-year-old or a 19-year-old. Yeah, do I want to? I want the revenue, but I don't want to sell to a 19-year-old because they're going to take my liquor license away, the ABC, right? So we do our best. We ID it at every point of sale. Every time you go to buy, even if you're old like you, every time you go to buy a beer, you're going to get ID'd. Right. Thank you. So, which is the point, right? So whether there's people in this room who are under 21, or, every single person is going to get ID'd every single time. So hip hop. Again, I sort of went around in a circle, but hip hop draws. It has its own challenges. This year we don't have any right now, which I'm a little disappointed about because we do like to have 1 or 2, specifically for diversity. It's much less challenging, right? A summer without hip hop. But classical, who's going to classical? Can you get 17,000 people or 10,000 people at a classical show? I don't know that you can. Do they want to be outside or do they want to be in Carnegie Hall? So it's a little bit of like, yes, a lot of the James Taylor folks would probably also go to a classical, right? Or Pentatonics, a younger group, might also like classical music, right? It doesn't just have to be the old people. But I don't think that they can get the numbers, and so they wouldn't be playing amphitheaters. That's the challenge.
Would that also be the situation with Latin?
I don't know the answer to that, actually.
And what about jazz?
Jazz, I think, that's probably the same thing. Have you ever seen jazz in a huge venue? I haven't.
Well, there have been jazz festivals, but
Yeah, I think it's a matter of capacity and draw. Now, it might be a matter of sound outside with jazz. I can't imagine that it is, right? Because some jazz festivals are outside. I think it's a matter of capacity. So we do hip hop because I can get 17,000 people to come to a hip hop show. This year just happens to be a light hip hop year.
okay. So we talk about drinking. What about people who smoke cigarettes or smoke weed?
So I hate cigarettes. I would love for the venue to be a cigarette-free venue.
But it's not.
Well, do you think I can hire that many security to enforce that? I have a 10,000 person lawn.
No,
You
but
wanna
is
smoke
there a
cigarette, go
sign that
smoke it.
says?
There is. But what I really do is, so I have to pick my battles, right? So in order to ban smoke, or in order to contain the smoking, we don't allow it in the theater at all. So anywhere in a seat, you cannot smoke. And my ushers will go and tell you to put it out, and then if you don't, they'll get a security guard and they'll throw you out after that, right? You cannot smoke in the theater.
The lawn.
In the lawn, you can smoke. In the lawn, unless the guy in front of you is completely complaining about the security guy, we're not going to dive into 10,000 people and stop you from smoking. We let it police itself.
And the same thing with weed, I would imagine.
Well, weed, I wish they would smoke more because then they get the munchies and then they buy concessions, right? It's good for business. Also, they fight less, right? They're not smoking weed at the country shows because they are fighting. They're drinking beer and they're fighting each other. Dave Matthews, Fish, they're not fighting. They're dancing. They're twirling around. I love the weed shows. It's not legal. I'm sure I'm not supposed to say that, but as soon as it's legal, I love the weed shows.
Tricky question here from Michelle.
Because that wasn't tricky.
Well, this here we go.
Okay.
She's curious, wants your perspective on handling a heated confrontation, whether it's with another employee, a higher executive in the or a higher executive in the music business, and what's your best advice on how to react or deal with situations like that?
So that's a really broad question.
Yep.
Is Michelle here?
Michelle Pardo?
Oh, hi. I like your hair. Can you narrow down one of those examples or sort of situations that you'd like me to respond to first, just so I can kind of, no, you don't want to? Anyway, thanks a lot, Michelle. Okay, well, let's start with a customer, right? So customers are always mad, especially in fucking New Jersey. I don't know what it is with you people. Holy crap. So you guys are New Jersey is actually the most litigious state in the country. So we have amphitheaters in almost every single state in the country. Live Nation has the most lawsuits at PNC Bank Arts Center. So come sue me, please. So if you're dealing with a patron who's angry, it's really all about de-escalation. And I use that word in my security trainings. I bring in people to do security trainings. I'm at the security trainings. We bring in professionals. De-escalation. All I want, really in a confrontation, all I want is for you to go back to your seat and enjoy the show. I don't want to eject you. I don't want to throw you out. I don't want to have to put your arm behind your back and take you down to my security office and throw you out of the venue. And I certainly don't want to call the police, who are on site. They're generally outside the gates. I only have to bring them in when they're inside the gates. If it's between two people, right, separate, de-escalate, try and get them to both stay in the venue unless something's egregious. There's so many witnesses. Everybody has a phone. Everybody videotapes everything. So it really depends on what happened. That's sort of the short answer for a patron or for the public. Co-workers, so anybody who works with me or near me will tell you that I don't mind a fight. I kind of sometimes maybe enjoy them, depending on who it's with. But I will tell you that I always win people over with honey, not vinegar, right? I am nicer to people. I never yell at people. I rarely yell at people, right? I would much rather be nice to you and give you honey than and still win the argument if it's a coworker. Executives are tricky, right? So I don't know exactly how to answer that question. I haven't had a fight with my boss ever, at least the current boss. But I will tell you a trick that I use when I'm on the phone. So I fight with vendors, or I might be fighting with my waste management guy, or I might be fighting with one of my troopers, or I might be fighting with whoever it is, or I might just have to have an uncomfortable conversation. Maybe I have to call my boss and have an uncomfortable conversation, or somebody who's sort of in the boss path, right? Because I have 800 bosses because it's corporate America. So what do I do if I'm on the phone? I stand up. That's my trick. I stand up and talk to people on the phone. That way I feel centered, I feel empowered, I feel like I get my own voice that way. So that's just a little trick for when I'm talking to somebody that maybe I'm having it. Maybe it's not a confrontation, maybe it's an awkward conversation, but something that I don't necessarily want to talk about. I stand up and that gives me a little bit of confidence. There was a hand up over there.
Yeah.
Speaking of bosses, how is your progress as a manager measured? By revenue growth, positive interactions with vendors, clients, or something else?
That's a good question. So on a macro level, it is on revenue growth and operations costs being contained, right? So overall, I have an AOI or an EBITDA, right, which is the profitability of the building, right? So I have X number of shows, and I have X number of events, and I have X number of costs, and God knows the building's 51 years old, so shit breaks, and I've got to keep all of those costs, and at the end of the day, I've got to make a certain amount of money for the venue, right? I've got to pay rent and insurance and salaries and all of that kind of stuff. So on a macro level, I'm judged by that. One step down, my bosses right now, and it's sort of the flavor of the year, right? Every few years it changes a little bit, at least it has for me in Live Nation. Right now, they're most interested in upsells. So I need you all to come, and I need you to buy into the VIP club, and then I need you to get a lawn chair, and then I need you to go sit in the reserved lawn, and I need you to pay money for all these things. 4 years ago, it was all about food and beverage. They didn't worry quite as much about upsells, but it was all about revenue growth. But you have one bad day, where your dumpsters are dirty and disgusting, and a tour manager sees it, and then he calls Michael Rapino, the CEO of the venue of the company, and he says, "This place is a shithole. Look at this picture of these disgusting dumpsters. Why would you let me play an amphitheater like that?" And guess what? I'm no longer judged by revenue. So there's a lot of challenges, right? Ultimately, it's sort of money and revenue and upsells. But if my direct boss, right, which is 2 or 3 people down from Michael, or the president of my division is getting calls from patrons or about patrons, or they figure out that you can email so-and-so at livenation.com, then I'm judged on that. So it's a kind of a complicated question, but it starts with revenue and it ends with just keeping my head above water.
All right. Madeline has a question saying, during your time as GM of Irving Plaza, social media quite hadn't taken off as it is now. Talk about the differences in promoting shows before and after the age of Instagram.
Sure. So at Irving Plaza, people were checking into Foursquare. We did something, I created a program called the Ticket Ferry. And I had somebody, if you checked into Foursquare, you might remember it even, if you checked into Foursquare, I guess, then you could get a picture of the girl who was going to be the woman who was going to be the ticket fairy for that night. And if you saw her at Irving Plaza and she was wearing a red hat or whatever it was, then she would give you 2 tickets to a show. That's about as sophisticated as social media was when I was at Irving Plaza, which was a little over a decade ago. This summer, I had a wonderful experience where I had to evacuate the lawn at a Florida Georgia line. It was a sold-out Florida Georgia concert, and it was lightning. This was before the Korn concert that we actually canceled, and it was lightning, and it was forecasted to be right around 8:15, right before Florida Georgia Line was going to go on. It was forecasting to have lightning, cloud to ground lightning hits all over in our area. And so we have certain rules of, if the lightning is within 5 miles, then we start to talk to the tour and have that conversation. If it's further away than 5 miles, it's really not a threat. If it's cloud to cloud, it doesn't really matter. If it's cloud to ground. And in Holmdel, we seem to have our own climate, right? We're really high up. We're like one of the highest elevations on the eastern seaboard. So we seem to be different. Like the Art Center itself seems to have a different climate than like the police station down the block, whatever. So we monitor the weather. So what happened is that it looked like it was going to be really bad. So I was talking to the tour. I was talking to the president of Live Nation Country Touring because he happened to be there, right, Brian O'Connell. And I was talking to their tour manager, and I was talking to their production manager, and I had my production manager, and I had my state troopers involved, and I had my boss on the line, and I had my boss's boss on the line. And it was like, do we do this? Do we not? Do we delay the show? Do we postpone the show? Do we cancel the show? Do we just go on? What if somebody gets hit by lightning? Does it look bad? Let's call AccuWeather. And we called 17 different, and my boss in Chicago was calling his weather guy, and I don't know, everybody had a crystal ball. And so what did we do? We decided, in the interest of safety, and it was the right decision, to evacuate the lawn because they're not undercover, right? Everybody else, if you've been to the Art Center, you know that there's the main theater. Most of the people are undercover under sort of the big spaceship, and then there's 10,000 people on the lawn that are. So we said, and it was a sold out show, and it was 8 o'clock, so almost everybody was in. We had 78 or 79% of the people in, right? We know by our scan counts. But we made a decision that we needed to, so we got with state police, we got with our production manager, we got with the tour, and we made an announcement saying that we were going to ask the lawn folks to go to their cars to wait out the weather, and that we would tell them what we were going to do once they came back, right? We notified our staff in advance, etc. We had messaging. We had social media people with us. The show was going to be delayed. Great. But we had these very beautiful digital VMS signs, which is variable messaging signs. So basically giant TVs. And we were posting on there, show delayed, please stand by, or inclement weather coming, or, usually it was on there like, please buy a VIP club pass, or whatever it is on our screens. And we accidentally, the screens were new to us this year, and we accidentally posted show postponed. And it was up there on 2 of the signs, not 4, 1 or 2 of the signs. It was on that as people were going to their cars. We were fully intending to bring them back. We had made the decision with the tour to bring them back. Okay, we'll wait this out for an hour or 2, and then we'll put Florida Georgia Line on stage. We'll bring everybody back on. How long does it take to load the venue? All these questions. All my staff was teed up. It was an accident. Somebody clicked the wrong button. It said show postponed. Well, guess what? Do you have a camera on your phone? So guess how many people took a picture and then posted it? Yeah, all of them. So it was less than 60 seconds that it was up. We realized we fucked up. We took it down. And then guess what? My boss's boss called me from Chicago and said, yeah, hey, so I just saw this. We're not fucking postponing. What are you doing? So all the people that saw that, it was only 60 seconds. Let's say it was 1,000 people. But then we posted it. Somebody posted it and reposted it. So now of the 10,000 people, let's say of the 7,000 people that we tried to evacuate, 4,000 of them said, okay, fuck this, I'm going home. So a bunch of people left because of a mistake that was then exacerbated because of social media. So we gave a lot of refunds, and we talked to a lot of people on the phone, and we brought a lot of people back to other shows, and we are still bringing a lot of people back to shows this year, and I imagine there's going to be a couple more years. But there's an example of social media challenges versus find your ticket fairy if you check into Foursquare.
In that case, is that something where Florida Georgia Line is like, well, I don't want to come back because you got rid of part of our audience?
Because they went on, they had a great show. They then tweeted, thanks Holmdel, you guys rock, this was amazing. Don't get me wrong, we worked with them. But that's a great question, and no, because in their minds, it was a success. They got paid, most people saw the show, right? So, and because we worked so closely with their management, which is what we would do, right? I did with Korn's management as well. Because we worked so closely with their management, I mean, honestly, I don't even know if the FGL guys know, right? I mean, some of the back of house people know. I don't know that those guys know, but no, they were not mad at us. A lot of other people in New Jersey were, though. Yes?
Hi.
So I'm like you in the sense that I'm an actress, that's my hope, but I'm also more interested in like the backstage kind of work of Broadway and things like that. So I don't want to say I'm like closed off to the music industry, but it's not my main focus right now.
Okay.
So are you able to like compare and contrast what you did before you got into the music side, like with the Broadway kind of things?
I am, but can you ask me a more specific question?
I'm trying to think. Like, I don't know.
So
Just like how long was your day, I guess, like that kind of difference, and yeah.
Gotcha. So theater, until I got to Broadway, I did a lot of off-Broadway theater, and then I did a lot of off-Broadway theater, and I don't think you're supposed to have any more offs than that, but there was a lot of offs. We threw it together ourselves. Like, it was like your heart and soul in a different way than the music business is, right? Presumably, most of you, a lot of you in this class are in here because the music business is your heart and soul, and that's what you want to work in or you already work in, right? If theater is your heart and soul, then you're doing it in some little black box with 30 people in the audience, and you made the postcards, and maybe your mom's there, and maybe she's not, and you've designed the set yourself, and you've hired all your friends, and you did all your money that you've been pooling together. Maybe you got a PR person, or maybe you just got the postcards. So it was a little bit more ragtag, and it was a little bit more like my individual creative heart was on the line. Now, obviously, I run an amphitheater that's very different than doing theater in a 30-person, theater or whatever. But it's super. Every day is different. Every day is super exciting in music, but it's not. It's a good question. Now I just realized I talked and I don't have an answer.
Spider-Man, was it different, like with that venue compared to? Like,
That okay. So with Broadway, by the time I got, that's okay, thank you for making it specific. By the time I got to Broadway, I liked it at first. When I went back to it for Spider-Man, obviously it was challenging for other reasons, like, the guy falling. But what I realized is that I didn't like it as much as music. And I studied theater and I went to grad school for blah, 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 blah. What I realized is because in theater, it's the same show every day. And so I sat in my office during Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, and I was the assistant general manager during that show, and I listened to, oh, you, Chitty Chitty Bang, I can't sing, every single day. It was I could hear it, right? And I thought about jumping out the window, but I was on the second floor, so I would have sprained an ankle or whatever. It wouldn't have been worth it. Music is different every single day, whether you're doing 400 shows at Irving Plaza and Gramercy or 40 shows at the Arts Center or whatever. It's different every single day. So that's what I learned to love about it, that 20 years ago, if you had asked me, I would have said, no way, no thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Question from Jenna. When the economy is in recession, what do you do to stimulate ticket sales?
Well, sometimes we lower prices, but really what the best tool that we have found over the years is Groupon, right? Everybody loves a discount. Groupon. And you know what the great thing about Groupon is from a business perspective? It's free marketing, right? So you buy a $20 ticket on Groupon to come see Backstreet Boys, whatever, fine, but now we've found a way to advertise it somewhere that you weren't looking at livenation.com or Ticketmaster or PNC Bank Arts Center or any of our social media pages. And then you spent $20 or maybe even spent $10 Groupon, right? And then when you come in, hopefully you'll be hungry, right? Even if you're a Groupon. Now the Groupon clientele spends less when they come. I know if I have 2,000 Groupon sales in a show that my ancillary revenue and my food and beverage revenue is not going to be that good. Because you've bought a $20 ticket, you're probably not then going to say to yourself, okay, good, I'll spend the $80 on food that I would have normally spent on the remainder of the ticket. No, it just doesn't work that way. But Groupon, what do? Do we lower prices? Not really, because we have to work with the artist, but we do use discount channels. That's in conjunction with the artist, and that's what we do. It's really about getting people in the door, especially in a recession time.
When Sean Streeter was here, he said he uses it in the beginning of marketing, not, everybody thinks of Groupon being, well, this show sucks, so now they're going to Groupon.
So Sean is completely right, but that that happened over time. When we first started using, I don't know if Sean told you this part, I know Sean very well. When we first started using Groupon Live Nation, the first year or two, we used it at the end. And then we said, whoa, wait a minute, we're training people to wait and not buy their tickets in the beginning. It only took us a year to figure that out, but it still took us a year. So then we flipped it. So now we use Groupon in the beginning. I use it for Magic of Lights too, right? We use it in the beginning because we're training you to buy early, to jump on it.
Right.
Yep.
Matthew wanted to know, when you were his age, around 19, what did you think you'd be doing today? And how does that differ from what you're actually doing now?
Well, much like my friend over there, I thought I would be acting. I thought I would be in the theater in some way.
So you never thought you'd be...
Not at all. Not music. I mean, I used to go to Irving Plaza. I was intimidated by it. That front door guy, who I later fired, Jerome, I was completely intimidated by him. I went to a lot of live music, but never in a million years did I think. But what I did, what do I do when I talk to somebody I'm having a difficult conversation with? I stand up. My other piece of advice is say yes. If you're presented with an opportunity and it's not the worst thing in the world, right? It's not like, hey, do you want to be a tester for the coronavirus? No, right? It's not something terrible, but it's something that maybe might work. Say yes to it, because you don't know. Because maybe you do it for 2 years and you fucking hate it. Then you go back to whatever you wanted to do. Or maybe you completely change your career and you run the art center.
And move to New Jersey.
And then you fucking move to New Jersey. So now I'm saying, right, I'm never going to move to New Jersey, never going to have kids, never going to get married. That worked out really well. So now I'm just saying I'm never going to win the lottery. Figure I switch it up a little bit. See if that works for me.
That's a good idea.
Thank you.
So,
I'm so glad you told me I could swear. Holy
Gadil says, questions, what can you say to people that are impatient about not reaching certain levels of success in certain ages of life, as well as people doubting the forks in the road and career choices?
Okay, so that is kind of what I just said a little bit. But do everything you can and do it for free if you have to. So wait tables or work at the bookstore or whatever you have to do to make money, right? Babysit, it doesn't matter. Whatever you have to do to get by, you have to do to get by. I waited tables for a very long time. I'm a vegetarian who sold steak at steakhouses, right? I got by. But go be an intern. Figure out a way to be an intern. Show up at every single job fair. Tell them that you'll work for free or just try it out. Just do whatever you can to get your foot in the door, right? I got my foot in the door on Broadway because I got my foot in the door at an off-Broadway theater because I was an intern there. I was an intern at Ensemble Studio Theater. I went there really for the acting program. It turns out I had some directing chops. Once you're a director, because I'm kind of bossy, if you ask anyone who works with me, they might tell you I'm bossy. So I had some directing chops, and then all of a sudden it was like, well, you're really organized, or maybe they didn't say organized, but you're really bossy, so you could probably produce, so why don't you work in our office? And the next thing you know, I was the producer there. So I went as an intern. So you just kind of, and it was free, and but you just kind of say yes to anything and everything that's in your field. Patience, I can't talk about that. I got nothing. I don't know.
So what you said about saying yes to each opportunity, do you feel like winding up at Live Nation and where you are now was more like you got lucky, or do you think that it was more like calculated?
Oh no, it was definitely not well, that's another good question. It was a lucky calculation? No, I think it was the other way around. It was calculated luck. So I wanted to, they advertised for an assistant general manager at a Broadway theater. And I was like, oh my God, I have none of the qualifications. This would be amazing if I could get this job. And then when I applied for it, they called me for a job. And then when I called her back to set up the appointment, she never called me back. And I was like, oh my God. And then I called her every day saying, you called me to set up an appointment for an interview. Can you please call me back? And she didn't. And it was 3 days, 4 days, 5 days. And I was calling every day. And then I was like, I don't want to be that annoying person. Finally, after 6 days, she called me back. And she said, I'm so sorry. Our phones didn't work. I didn't know I had a message. Her name's Jenny Curlin. She's a friend of mine now. So I was freaking out. And then I got in the room, and it was the day they were doing the second round interviews for the assistant general manager position. So I already jumped into the second round, and I happened to connect with the guy who was the general manager who was doing the interviews. So I interviewed with the woman who had my job and was leaving, and within 5 minutes she said, hold on, I've got to get the boss, Micah. And I went in, and he and I just happened to connect because we had a very similar off-Broadway and off et cetera, background, and we connected. But I was there at the second round of interviews, and she didn't take my phone call, and I applied for a job that I was not qualified for. Luck, calculated because I wanted to be on Broadway, and then it just happened that they said 6 months into it, they said, oh no, not 6 months into it, a little over a year, I think it was like 13 months into it. They said we were part of the music division, because we were, and they said, I think you'd be really good in music. I think you'd be really good at Irving Plaza. And I was like, yeah, no. Right? I said, yeah, no, I don't think so. No, I think you're kind of the next up-and-comer. My boss at the time, right, a good friend of mine now. I really think you. And I was like, and that was the first time I really said yes. I said, why not try it? Go run Irving Plaza. What's the worst that could happen, right? And so I said yes. And then I said yes to the Gramercy Theater, and then they offered me PNC, and I said, no way, I don't know anything, same thing, don't know anything about grass, don't like the music, don't want to run a 17,000 person venue. God knows I don't want to go through a tunnel. But I said yes, after a lot of deliberation, I said yes. Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry, I keep asking questions.
No, please.
So you seem pretty confident in yourself now and in what you're doing and how you make things happen. Were you always like that? Or was
No.
it like a...
Holy crap. No, not at all. Definitely not.
More like a fake it till you make it.
Absolutely.
Pa-
Stand up when you're having a phone conversation.
Passive
Absolutely.
Canadian. It's a passive Canadian.
I'm a passive Canadian. No, absolutely. And it's okay to not know stuff. That's what I know. That's a little bit of age, but a lot of experience, right? It's okay to not know stuff. But when you go into a job interview, let's say you get the job interview, that's hard in and of itself, right? But if you go into a job interview, be prepared. Know something about the company. Have 3 questions that you want to ask that you might not get to ask. Don't talk the whole time. Make sure they're allowed to talk to you. Make sure you do stand up for yourself and you say, I do have a question. Is it okay if I ask you? Right? Maybe you Google the person. Maybe it's not about the person. Maybe it's the company. But there's such easy ways to go into, and you may or may not get the job, right? They might want their niece or whatever. Like there's so many reasons why you would or wouldn't.
Did you write a thank you
But
note?
fake it. I sent pizza. I once had a job interview and I sent them a pizza with a funny joke in it. Or a riddle. It wasn't a joke, it was a riddle. I can't remember what the thing
Get the
was.
job?
No. Come on, that was creative. But yeah, I did all of that stuff because, right? And I didn't hound them every single day. Oh my God, please do not hound me every single day, right? Like that, you have to sort of monitor how much you want to, be in somebody's junk.
All right. Brian wanted to know what departments in the industry did you work at that benefited you the most in your current position?
Well, I don't have a good answer for that because really I kind of skipped up to management, right? I did a lot of theater. I did a lot of crappy things in theater. I waited tables a lot, which helped me a lot. Everybody should wait tables or join the military or work retail. But I don't know. I kind of jumped into management of music, so I'm not a good person to ask that question for. I would say operations, get in the office, get there and hoof bike rack around, right? Or whatever it is. And not to say that you want to be necessarily in operations, but if you want to be in A&R, if you want to be in booking or whatever, just get in there and sort of experience it. But I'm not a good example of that, so I can't really answer that question properly to Brian.
What's your degrees in?
Shakespearean acting. So basically what you're doing is a waste. No, that's not what I mean, but it's true. I have Shakespearean acting degrees, so yeah, I'm always a bad choice once that comes out. Sorry, Steve.
That's fine. Do you know anything about the Live Nation Coaching Nation?
I don't. Is there such a thing? I thought I was it.
Apparently the website mentions Coaching Nation. It's a partnership with a thing called the Holmdel Group.
Oh, yeah.
Career development.
Holmdel Group is awesome. No, I don't know anything about it. I do know about the Holmdel Group. They are like life coaches or job coaches, and they do these amazing seminars, and we go on these general manager meetings, and they had them at one general manager meeting, and it was awesome. It was like sort of helping you along your career of how to figure out what you want and how to be powerful, not powerful, but like the author of your own path and stuff like that. They're awesome, but I don't know anything about Coaching Nation.
Okay. Well, I think we've drained the questions because a lot of people ask similar questions as to your current role there. Yeah, shoot.
The PNC sponsorship, the fact that you're now,
Mm-hmm.
is that sold by Live Nation or was that sold by the Turnpike Authority?
That's a great question. It was a joint effort, and the revenues are shared jointly. I believe it was sold by Live Nation. It's been 20 years, which is amazing. More than 20 years, I think, which is amazing. So many buildings, such as Jones Beach and BB&T, both referenced earlier, have changed names many times, including the Broadway Theater that I was at. We are fortunate, and there are challenges with sponsors. Sometimes they think they own the building. But we are fortunate that we've had that identity for a really long time. And then you guys are so goddamn stubborn in New Jersey that people still call it the Arts Center and won't call it PNC Bank Arts Center. But yeah, I believe it was sold by Live Nation, but as a joint effort.
Okay. And it's a union shop? Like, do you have a curfew? Like, can you talk about what it's...
Sure, yeah. So my stagehands are union. I have stagehands and Teamsters. My ushers and cleaners and front of house are not union. So I worked on Broadway. I worked with Local 1. I worked where my cleaners were union right before this job. Right now I have stagehands, so the guys and gals that put up the show, and the Teamsters that unload the truck. Those are all union, and they have very specific work hours. It's really why we have all that food, because they have to be fed every 4 hours according to their contract. And then we do have a curfew, but that's because of the township. So we have a hard curfew of 11 p.m., and it's because Karen Strickland calls me at 11:01. Right, the lady who lives, blah, 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 whoever it is. So there are, we get a lot of noise complaints, only because there's sort of houses, really rich people's houses nearby, and they call me at 11:01.
So for a Florida Georgia Line concert,
So,
like that situation.
so here's my secret, is that I allow, kind of just me, nobody told me to do this, I kind of just allow one show a year to go over, and then I take the consequences. They all call me, they got blah, blah, blah. The doctor who doesn't like the street sweeper late at night, he calls me, like, I know them now, right? I allow one show, but what I did with that one is I called the mayor of Holmdel, I called my landlord, right, my contacts with the landlord. I called a couple of political people. Obviously, my bosses were involved. So I called the Holmdel police, with whom I do not deal, right? I only deal with state police because I'm a state building. The state police were obviously involved. So I did my due diligence, including calling the mayor of Holmdel. It helps that I have he's in my cell phone. But I sort of did my due diligence and said, hey, I'm going to go late. You can beat me up, you can write whatever you want in the papers, you can have everybody call me, but I have to do this. And everybody the next day, including the mayor of Holmdel, called me. I will say it was a traumatic show. We had a lot of challenges, a lot of blowback. But my president, the mayor of Holmdel, the head of the NJTA, the executive director, they all called me and said, you handled that great, and thank you for reaching out for us, and we would never have shut you down for that. But it's because I knew who to reach out to, right? It's because I'm always willing to have that difficult conversation to say, hey, guess, here's a heads up. Hey, I'm going to break the rules, but here's a heads up. I'm going to break the rules, right? Imagine how much less often you would have gotten grounded if you just said it. I don't know, probably not. Not in my house, but.
But how did you learn or know to do that? The average person would
Because
go,
a lot of times I
yeah.
didn't do it. And then it was like, you should have just told me. I learned by f***ing up.
Got it.
Right? So I'm not the best at the political, I'm okay at it, right? I'm like, can I glad hand? Can I, shake babies and kiss hands a little bit? I'm not phenomenal at it. I have some close colleagues, some of whom you are also close with, right? That I can do that with, but I'm not always the best at it. But what I knew is, it's basically CYA. My whole job is CYA. Does anybody know what that is? Cover your ass. That is the most important thing in business. Cover your ass. So I don't want the mayor saying, you didn't tell me, or I don't want the police the Holmdel police showing up saying, we got to shut you down. So what I did is I did my best to cover my ass in a difficult situation. So the way I look at my job on a daily basis is it's kind of emergency management. It's not emergency management like, people are dying. It's not emergency management like I'm saving lives, right? But we're creating once-in-a-lifetime experiences for people. We're allowing people to come and be entertained. I'm in the hospitality business, but there's 17,000 people and another 1,050 or 1,500 people that work there. Something's going to go wrong all the time. And I have a 51-year-old building. So it's kind of emergency management at all times. And I love that. Like, there's a lot of coffee and I can drink it.
Are there any other specific mistakes that you've learned from in past careers or
in past lives? Yeah, the postponed show was a big one. Let's see. Sometimes I don't know if the word is like lazy or scared, but sometimes like being too scared to call the mayor or to go schmooze the agent that thinks he's way more important than me, right? And probably is. And I think to myself, well, he doesn't care who I am. I'm just the venue manager, right? Like, who am I? Stuff like that. And then not going and making the face-to-face because either I'm lazy, I'm in the middle of, doing the money with the artist, and therefore I don't think I have time to go do so. Not doing face-to-face. That's always been a big mistake that I make, and I try not to make it anymore because if you get in front of somebody's face and you say, hey, I'm Jorelle, I just want to say thank you for being here, or whatever it is, right? In my job, it is political, and it's not my number one strength. It always pays off to have done that. Next time, they're like, oh, yeah, hey, I remember you. Or sometimes they look at me dead in the eye and says, no, have we met before? I have one booker, she does it every single time she sees me. She just doesn't remember me. I don't rate with her. Okay, you know what? Who cares? Every single time I'll say, oh, no, we actually met this time and this time and this time, and it's so good to see you again. I'm glad you're here. Talking about winning people over with honey, right? So I find that that's a mistake that I used to make that I try not to make anymore. Yes?
Hi. I'm going to go back to like the confidence thing and also being a female. How did you, like in your earlier in your career, how did you push through that and to come off as confident as you are now? Does that make sense?
I did what boys do.
Okay.
I did what boys do. I looked at boys, I looked at men, and I did what they did, right? Steve acts like he knows what he's doing. He doesn't. But look at the way he's sitting. Right? He knows what he's doing. He acts that way. That's how men are trained, right? I'm older than most of the people in this room, so I can say this with a little bit of sexism, but they're trained that way. Men are trained to try at sports. Women are told to have nice manners, at least when I was younger, right? Because I'm 100 years old, apparently. So I started acting like them, right? I read some books on it too. Right, I had to negotiate sometimes, and I read books on negotiating. I read this amazing book. I have no affiliation with the woman whatsoever that wrote it. I don't even know her name. It was called Women Don't Ask. I talk about this. It was written by, I think, a professor at Carnegie Mellon, and a friend of mine who had gone to Carnegie Mellon recommended it, and I had to negotiate with my boss. I was taking another position, and and they were not offering me the right amount of money, and they were really, really dogging me, basically. And I had to go to my really, really scary boss at the time. This is more than a decade ago, my really, really scary boss. And I had to go to him and I had to stand up for myself. And I had to stand up when I talked to him. And he sort of had a reputation for maybe not being that fond of women. And I had to go negotiate with him. And I read this book and it said, for example, and I'm sure I'm getting the example wrong, but for example, they did a test study where they had a bunch of men and women or students go into a focus group, and they said, if you come spend a half an hour with us and answer these questions about whatever, you'll get anywhere from $3 to $10. And they had everybody come in, and they did the focus group for a half an hour, and they left, they gave everybody $3. And do you know that almost all the men said, wait a minute, I thought I was going to get from 3 to 10, and not one woman asked for $10. They all took the 3, not one. Now, that's a small group. It's not necessarily completely representative. It was a long time ago, but I kind of read books about it. And then I kind of looked at the boys around me and said, what are they doing? And then I acted like them. I acted as if, right? Act as if. Fake it till you make it a little bit. And you know what? You go home and you cry, or you work out, or you drink a glass of wine, or you talk to your girlfriends, or you talk to your boyfriends, or whatever it is, and you go, God, I don't think I can do this, or that's not me. But you go and you pretend, and then you use your strengths as a woman. So one of my strengths as a woman, and there are now, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 female GMs for amphitheaters for Live Nation. There used to be 3 or 4, right? One of my strengths is that I'm willing to ask questions and to not know. I don't see the men doing that as much. So I'm willing to say to my boss or somebody who's, talking about something, a specialty, or, we go on these GM meetings, or whatever, I'm willing to call up and say, hey, I don't know how to do this and I need your help. Well, that's a more female trait than it is a male trait. So what I tried to do is figure out what those things are and use them to my advantage.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yes?
Do you think in the workplace now that women are assumed to like play a certain role, like what you said, being ladylike and stuff, or now people just go about their things?
I think Me Too is great. I don't think it's worked completely. So I think if we were at, I don't know, I'm making up numbers. These numbers are nothing, no statistics. But if we were at 65%, now we're at 82%. We're not there completely. So yeah, you know, I get called a bitch all the time. If I were a man, I'd be called tough. Does that answer your question?
Wow.
Yeah. Yes.
Back to what you just said, that if you were a man, you'd just be called a man, and since you're a woman, you're called a bitch.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do to kind of set up boundaries, because you are a boss? How do you set boundaries when people speak to you, and
That's a great question.
how you act?
So it starts from the ground up. I don't go hang out with my staff. I don't go, my immediate office staff, yes. I don't go drink with the security staff. They all drink in the parking lot after a show or hang out or whatever. I shouldn't say it's drinking, but I don't go party with them. I don't engage on social media with them at all. I don't even friend them on, you know, I mean, there are, 8 million friend requests and 8 million, don't you know this person on Facebook? I don't do that with my staff, right? The most important thing I don't do, and I learned this a long time ago, I do not, even to try and be funny, I do not denigrate myself in front of people. I do not say, oh yeah, well that's just because I'm stupid, or a good boss would do that, or anything like that. I do not, I mean, I've made a couple of jokes funny in here, but I do not do that in front of my staff, ever. Now I make jokes to my staff, right? But they know what my expectations are, and that's really important. To say what your expectations are is really important. And then to make sure that, like when I used to say things, like back when I was waiting tables and I would say self-denigrating things, I don't know, this isn't necessarily what I said, but if I said, oh, I'm so stupid, well then why shouldn't the person next to me call me stupid? I just called me stupid. And I realized that, and I stopped doing it. And then I stopped being so social. And then I stopped, and this is a little bit, this comes with age, but also experience, I stopped caring what they thought of me. So the minute I decided that I don't care if my security staff likes me, I use security staff because they're the most challenging, but my usher staff or my parking staff or my stagehand staff, the minute I say, I don't care if you like me, right? The minute it got easier. I just fired somebody last season that I really didn't want to fire, that I had to fire because of his behavior. He's like a class favorite. Everybody's so mad at me for firing him. He was a good guy, really good at his job, a supervisor. He just broke the rules one too many times, and I can't have that. I fired him. I didn't want to fire him because he was good at his job, but he wasn't good at following my rules, and my rules are important. And when I say, you can't park here, or you can't take a break at this time, or you've overextended your whatever, and he breaks that rule 3 times, then he's out, right? So everybody, the whole staff is mad at me. Too bad. And that's when I started saying, it doesn't matter, that's when I got better at my job in that regard. You're welcome.
Anyone else? No? Okay, well then, I'm going to say thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. This was great. Thank you.